There were two Linderman brothers that lived in Blandville before the Civil War. One was Abraham and the other one was John. Now, Abraham was a Northern sympathizer, and John was a slave owner and a Southern sympathizer. Abraham left Blandville, went north, and joined the Union Army. We had, at one time in my life, the brand new blue uniform that his mother had made for him. It was handmade and included all the epaulets and the belt and the holder for the sword, but no sword, and it included hand-knitted wool socks, and it was wrapped in cotton wool and mothballs in an old trunk that was roped together, and it sat out in the office building of the house where I grew up for many, many years. Twice in my lifetime, I remember Daddy opening that and showing it all to me and explaining that it was made about a month before the Civil War was over and that it was perfect. There was not a moth hole in it or anything, and it was museum quality, and someday he was going to donate it to a museum. Well, after he died, it was still there in the trunk, and it disappeared. And my brother accused me of selling the trunk and everything that was in it, but of course I didn't, so we're pretty sure that he sold it to an antique dealer. In fact, one antique dealer claimed that she had bought the whole trunk and everything in it for $500. Nevertheless, Abraham, after the war, spent a great deal of time in eastern Kentucky, where it was a strong Union area. And from what I know, he was the father of at least 3 daughters. However, we have a record of his death in Blandville, Kentucky, from the book that was by Mr. Orr that listed all of the people. And so Abe came back to Blandville sometime and died there. Ellen knew him and wrote to him, and somewhere in all the stuff we have letters to Abe from grandmother Linderman, grandmother Ellen Linderman, and then we have some answers, or at least one answer from Abe to grandmother. Now, John became the local judge when Blandville was the county seat, but they still lived out on the land that his father or grandfather, I'm not sure which, had supposedly purchased. He was riding home one day, and there was, as a judge, he made enemies because people didn't like to be found against. And as he was riding by, the story goes that he was riding his horse, and there was a barn really, really close to what was the road. It was for buggies and horseback and everything. And this guy who hated him wanted to scare him, and he stepped out either from the barn or from behind the barn, pointed a big shotgun in the air to scare Mr. Linderman, but it scared the horse, and the horse threw him, and it broke his neck, and he died. And that's the story I know of his death.
But he was was he a soldier?
No, John was never in the army. He stayed home and was a judge.
Okay.
And a farmer.
Okay.
And supervised the people who farmed for him, until he died.
Okay, so he was a Southern sympathizer, though.
He was a Southern sympathizer, but he was never a soldier.
Okay.
Blandville was very much a Southern sympathizer area. And Abe was considered one of those damned Yankees.